your Gen Z, so you're kind of 97 to 2000 and odds, 2006, 7, 8, were twice as likely to face digital exclusion than millennials, which is more kind of where I would sit.
Welcome to the Digital Customer Comms podcast, where we discover how leading regulated companies engage, retain and delight customers at scale. Today, we're talking about digital exclusion, why reliable internet access is now essential for everyday life, and how we can make sure that no one's left behind. Joining me is Vicky Stephen, Customer Vulnerability and Financial Inclusion Wellbeing Manager at Virgin Money. Vicky leads their work to support customers facing financial and digital barriers, along with community partners like Good Things Foundation. We'll hear how Virgin Money is tackling digital exclusion, how they balance scale with individual support, and what industry and government can do to bridge the digital divide. Hi, Vicky.
Hi, Sam.
Good to have you here. Thank you so much for coming on. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do at Virgin Money and why you're so passionate about digital inclusion / exclusion?
So I suppose for me, in my opinion, I have one of the best jobs in the bank. So not only do I get to provide impact for real customers every day that walks through our doors, but predominantly my job is to try and research and resource some ways of bridging gaps to vulnerabilities, especially that with digital inclusion. My main partnership at the moment is that of the Good Things Foundation, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about them later. I suppose for me, I come from quite a rural area of Scotland, so community focus has always been quite important to me as an individual. And when you do live in a rural community, digital did seem to be something quite far-fetched many years ago, but now it's very much a way of living. So it's always been quite close to my heart for that purpose.
Yeah, I suppose there's always this, especially in the past, I've always felt a kind of, right, it's really exciting, we're working in tech, we're doing all this stuff. And then sometimes you go back home to your grandma, say, and you see how real people interact with these kinds of technologies, and there's a bit of a contrast there.
Yeah, definitely. So I suppose that we used to look at it as very much as a luxury, but now for me, digital, and it's dead funny, and you see like your grandma and stuff. I remember, teaching my dad how to use a mobile banking app, and he's not that old, can I just say, but it's now like a lifeline. It's just a way of life, and we've got lots of things now down to like, that's how I order my prescription online. It's how my parents would order their prescription. So it's getting that balance of having digital as part of your life and still having that balance of face-to-face services.
Yeah, I suppose some people would say, or it would come to their mind, talking about digital inclusion seems sort of superfluous. It's inevitable. Everything's moving to digital. You either kind of get on the train or you get off. That's the only choice you have. So when we talk about trying to sort of reinforce inclusion and act proactively encourage it, I should say, why is that important to you, and why is it important to companies like Virgin Money and this society as a whole?
So I think it's really important to all of us as a whole, just purely in the fact of it is something that deals with all aspects of life. So when we think about, going on that journey, and as you say, getting on the train or getting off the train, digital did used to be that luxury, whereas now we see that for all aspects of, even if it's things like keeping in contact with friends and family, sometimes you don't always live in the same places that your family and friends are now. People have moved on, and digital is that great way of managing to maintain relationships and stay in touch with people. Or it might be how you want to utilise your day-to-day living, whether it be through your groceries, GP, loads of different ways of working. But at the same time, you can encourage everyone round about you to just get a little bit more digitally capable.
So you guys have partnered with the Good Things Foundation, and that's kind of what led me to talking to you in the first place, actually. Can you walk us through how that partnership started and how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had the pleasure of having the partnership for about 3 years. Initially, it came from a networking conversation. So within the financial services industry, we do all work together, and we do every now and again get together and really work on what's the biggest impact to customers and communities, and how can we maybe build some other bridges and relationships with charities, community organisations, or anyone else that might make societal change just that little bit easier for people. We got speaking to Good Things Foundation, and I'll be honest, I didn't really know much about them. I personally hadn't heard of them, but had this amazing conversation and instantly was like, right, you guys are doing good. You are doing good for society. They really recognised a problem that perhaps we didn't look at as a problem in society, and they've tackled it head on. The main thing being with the National Data Bank, which hopefully we might move on to, and basically making sure that those in low poverty or low income households, or those that perhaps come from a vulnerable space and their backgrounds, have got access to the internet and not feeling left behind. And that can be done for a variety of reasons, no questions asked. They very much want to make sure that everyone has a choice in the way that they either do, for us, do their banking or their finances, but for every other aspect, whether it be to increase skill sets or, as you say, maybe to go on to learn how to do a CV or seek employment, etc. So that was the kind of first touch point that we had with them. I suppose for me, it was then I just really looked at, what else do they do? Like, it's all fine and well giving people internet access, but if there's no skills or capability there, it was really great to see how they had already started the Learn My Way programme, which is a kind of basic skill sets of how to stay safe online and the kind of things that you can do online. And I think that me taking it on, I truly believe nobody should be left behind. And I do think that's a little bit of my background as well. But they genuinely have helped me to kind of have those conversations both internally and externally to try and say, like, everyone should have the option of digital access, especially in 2025.
So tell me a little bit about the National Data Bank. How does it actually work? It gives people access to the internet, but in what way? I mean, the internet's quite a big bill on your monthlies, right? So how does that work?
So the National Data Bank is set up through Good Things Foundation, and they have a number of strategic partners who support the National Data Bank and gift them the data. So anyone can become part of the National Data Bank. You can just apply online, and Virgin Money are the first and only UK bank to do that. So every one of our branches, we've got 91 of them across the UK, are what you would deem as data banks. So what that means is that anybody, customer or non-customer, can walk into Virgin Money branches and we will provide them with a SIM, and that SIM card will give them 25 gigabytes of data, so that can get you onto like a browser or your WhatsApp or Skype, whatever it might be, for up to 12 months on there. So depending on the purpose that people might want access to the internet, that should be enough provision to be able to help them on there. It's non-means tested, so there is a small conversation just about, what the data bank is and making sure we can get that set up. But effectively, we just want to give everyone that anchor and that opportunity to be able to get online. And with us having face-to-face branches across the UK, it's a great way for us to help deliver that message of the National Data Bank.
And that must be so rewarding for you as well, because you've got actual, one-to-one conversations and interactions happening between people that obviously come back to you as stories, right? Have you got any stories or anecdotes that have been shared?
Honestly, I'm always very humbled. So it's great that I get the opportunity to own this relationship. But our branch colleagues are the absolute backbone of this. They have people in front of them every single day. And you are quite right that whilst we're having that first interaction with them, whether they're a customer or not, it's very rare they don't come back and speak to us. So if we take the kind of situations that some of these people are at kind of breaking point, so some of them might be unemployed, we tend to see a lot of people who have been impacted by domestic abuse or perhaps have experienced homelessness. So that they're at a stage in their life where perhaps there's very little aspects of hope. And just with that one small gesture of, sit them down, giving them the data, having a conversation with them, quite often we'll show them how to do something online as well, particularly if it's linked to perhaps applying for benefits or something. We'll point them in the right direction and move them forward. We tend to find they do then come back in and see us and tell us, most of the time how we've changed their lives, how we've helped them just get that stepping stone into the next stage. We have an awful lot of situations where it's a hard conversation to come in and ask for help. The first hurdle is always the hardest, to walk in and say, please, can you help me? So a lot of people from kind of low income households, perhaps unable to provide the kind of internet access and the tuition for their children that they might need as they work through school, especially in a digital world. So we tend to find that that's some of your biggest impacts, that by them increasing their skill set and now having access, they've been able to help their children and young adults within the household prepare for the future that they're going to have across their lifetime. And that's always really humbling to hear.
So in terms of that first conversation, how do you get it out there that you've got these hubs and they're there to help people? Are you building partnerships with local community centres and things like that?
So we have an amazing colleague base. I was actually out in a branch 2 weeks ago, so I'm really lucky that I also get to go and visit. And what we are now trying to do is really be the ambassadors for change. So digital exclusion is massive in the UK, far bigger than perhaps we realise. We're just one little clog on that wheel. So now that all our branches are national data banks, we do put that in social media so that if people, know someone that could benefit from that, they can send them our way. But now we're at the stage that people in our branches, along with myself and some of our team, are out there and we're connecting into your local food banks, we're connecting into anyone in the local community centres or any action groups that might take place in your communities, and either encouraging them or supporting them to become data banks, as well as some of the other options that you can do through Good Things Foundation. So we're just trying to help build that bridge, for want of a cliche, bridging the digital divide, which Good Things Foundation do use, and making sure that everyone knows that there is help there. There's something at the end of the line that if you feel that you're excluded in this way, we can get you that help. I think it's always nice when we find that like your libraries are very, very on board with it. Some of our banking hubs, which are run by the post office, are also involved in the National Data Bank. And we're starting to see that ripple effect of more and more people coming on board. So, obviously we would love for digital exclusion not to be a problem, but whilst we're still in that part of society, that effect and getting more and more people access to data is really, really key, and one of the biggest things that we're doing across our communities.
It's amazing. And it's obviously a big project for you guys and yourself. So let's talk about the kind of practicalities of going from, right, we've got this thing that we want to do, to making it happen throughout the country. What kind of challenges were there for you?
Okay, so let's be honest, it's not all blue sky approach. You can always have that big idea. And for me, this was very much a big idea and very much out with the realms of banking, I suppose. I'm always in awe of how good the people in the branch network are. People who deal with the public every single day honestly deserve gold medals across the board. The practicality mostly came on getting people trained up. So I didn't have to bring anybody on board on the why we were doing it. I think everyone understands why we were doing it. But with 91 branches, which is roughly about 950 colleagues, all trained up for something on top of their day job, as well as everything they've got on in life, but also with some of these people potentially being impacted themselves. We don't know, everyone's backgrounds and what they're doing. So the overall training was quite a challenge. So it was necessary to take the 91 branches and kind of chop them up. So did some research on where the biggest impacts of digital exclusion are in the UK. And we took some of those real key places and trained up those branches first. That then led me on a bit of a train the trainer situation. So I had some great people already then trained who could help me roll that out. We did some online demonstrations, but I suppose more than anything, it was more about having hints and tips as to how we were going to have the conversation. So we can show them what the system looks like, how to physically put the SIM card in, etc. The biggest thing was going to be having the conversation, because you don't know the reason why that individual needs the data or needs the support. And I would say 99% of the time that if you help them with the National Data Bank, we're going to help them with something else. There's probably something else in their life they need help with.
Yeah.
So I think that part of it was the biggest hurdle. The actual gifting of the data takes about 6 minutes. But I absolutely know that everyone that comes through and needs supported is probably offered a cup of tea and just a good conversation about what they need in life and how we can help them take that forward.
And this isn't just a binary step from, they were doing nothing to help customers to now they're doing this. I imagine all the time they are helping people with accessing online banking on their phone and things like that. Did you have those kind of anecdotal stories and those kind of case studies in your pitch, your original pitch for the idea?
So yeah, I suppose the great thing is that our branch colleagues, and I'm saying branch, I have great people across the whole business, but I'm a big advocate for the branch colleagues, as you've probably guessed by now. But our branch colleagues were doing this day in, day out. So even if I look at some of my own backgrounds, I've been in banking for about 20 years, started out in a branch network. You are having these conversations. You're trying to help people when they come in. A lot of the time we get people in, and whilst the interaction might be about banking, you will go off onto a tangent of, oh, I can show you how to download the NHS app. I can show you how to do this, because we're just good people, and good people will always help other people. So I knew that these things were happening. What they didn't have was they didn't have that anchor of, you're from low income, you're from a vulnerable situation, you can't afford the data, you have no way of getting online. They didn't have that extra token to say, let me give you the first step and then let's chat through the rest of it there. So there was that kind of bit missing. I think that's where Good Things Foundation have kind of evolved from, because we've always been trying to help people who need help and want help. We just didn't quite have that anchor of, well, how do we get them online? You know, because for some people paying a phone bill is just not feasible, or they perhaps don't have that, you know, way of working out how to get online. Like, how do I get a phone? How do I get a contract, etc.? So I think what we did is we plugged that gap and made sure that it was a seamless conversation that for those that do require help.
The conversation around vulnerable customers and vulnerable people has really been more prominent over the last couple of years. But we tend to talk about people who are older or, you know, perhaps disabled or, you know, things like that, rather than digital exclusion. Do you think people are becoming more aware of the issue, and how big is the issue in the UK? Do we know?
Yes, interestingly, and I would agree with you on that. I'm going to sound like a real millennial in a minute, if that makes any sense, but there was some recent research, and surprisingly, your Gen Z, so you're kind of 97 to 2000 and odds, 2006, 7, 8, were twice as likely to face digital exclusion than millennials, which is more kind of where I would sit. They also, from the research, are less confident in using the internet and particularly managing their finances. So I think it's always really interesting that we do presume, we always, you know, it's just natural in life, isn't it, that we presume that it's certain generations and certain ages and certain capabilities, etc. But I think that what we have found by doing some research and trying to address the work with Good Things Foundation is that everyone's impacted in some way. So not one size fits all. We need to try and get to a stage that, you know, people are talking about it. We understand that everyone may be impacted in society, even if they're of a younger generation or they've came from X style of background, etc. So it's always really, really key to make sure that we're not presumptive on digital now, particularly when it comes to managing finances, because we're doing an awful lot of work across the financial services industry. There's a lot of work to try and educate and support people to be online, but at the same time, you've still got that nice balance of people who are using things like banking hubs or the branch network, etc., ATM usage. So it's trying to get that balance on who it could be that's impacted and how we reach out to them in the different ways to make sure that they know that there's help at hand.
Yeah. And do we have any data on why it is that younger people are more impacted? I mean, I can think of maybe a couple of reasons. None of them would explain such a massive difference. But is it embarrassment? Sort of once you're excluded, you don't go back in as much if you're younger?
I think there's just so much research out there. And I suppose there's no one answer to it. A lot of it will come down to upbringing, education, also your UK, where you're based in the UK. So, like, as I've said before, like, I'm in kind of rural Scotland, so I can't use Uber, for example. I can't get an Uber taxi to go home on a Saturday. It just doesn't exist where I live.
The horror.
But I know, the horror of it is, I go down to London, for example, and it's the first thing my friends would say to me, oh, we'll just get an Uber. I'm like, oh, yeah. You can do that at the touch of a button. So there are lots of components that impact it. And I think that the biggest thing is that digital exclusions, I personally think it's still seen as a bit of a taboo. So a lot of people won't admit to not knowing how to do something, but digital is evolving really, really fast, that, we're playing a kind of catch-up game. And I do think that at some point, if you're a bit left behind at the start, it's becoming a little bit harder to try and catch up. And that's why it's so important to have the conversation and make sure people know there is some skills and capability training. There are people that will chat you through this, and there are ways to get yourself online and feel confident online. Because for me, feeling confident is probably the most important thing.
Yeah, I guess the confidence to try to have a go is what separates the people who are sort of permanently excluded from it. When you were talking about your dad earlier, and I was talking about my grandma, my grandma's 80, she'll kill me for not knowing, but 86, I think, something like that. And she uses her iPad, her iPhone every day. She's pretty good. I'd say, sometimes she's better than like my dad, who is half her age, but that's due to her sort of willingness to like write things down and actually proactively learn. And there is there are systems for learning, for keeping up with change, just like there are in organizations. I think a lot of it is really about that, isn't it? It's how do I find the information that I need to solve a problem that I don't know the answer to?
Yeah, so my dad's not 86, just in case he decides to listen to this. But he is obviously a little bit older, and I would agree it took a lot to try and I remember trying to get my dad to like stop using checks. And I'm like, no, let's move on a little bit. But, now, yeah, off he goes. He loves to do his prescription online. He thinks that is the best thing you can ever do, is to order your prescription online. But I do think that you're right. We need to continue having the conversation. And it might just be you having the conversation with your grandma. And then perhaps your grandma's going to speak to her friends at a local knit and natter or community group or something that might encourage someone else to say, I would like some help. I would really like to know a little bit more about that. And I think that's why the relationship Virgin Money's got with the community groups, like the food banks and the library, etc., has really, really helped us focus and have some meaningful conversations with people, and moves back to that ripple effect. So now people tend to know that we work with Good Things Foundation, but that's been over 3 years. So it's not happened overnight, but we have started to make a little bit of traction to where we need to get to.
So what's next for Virgin Money and digital inclusion? What's next for the partnership with Good Things? Any new programs coming up?
So delighted that we are going to extend the contract with Good Things Foundation. They've been such a joy to work with. And the great thing is that whilst the majority of our conversations take place in branches at the moment, we are quite excited that we're going to roll out some education support to the wider network. So, for example, I'm trialling some stuff at the moment that if we have people who phone into our contact centres and require a little bit of help, we're able to then support them over the phone by giving them the resources and the support they might need to become more digitally confident. We're hoping to advocate a little bit more on Learn My Way. So Learn My Way is the online skills programme, as I said, and that we're hoping to get through some of our community activity. So at the moment, a lot of it's quite self-served as such. So we can support people to get registered, they can look through the modules, etc. But we're hoping to expand that out so that people who enjoy being facilitated and spoken to in that open environment, we can actually do that education piece. So if we're out in the local library, for example, we might be able to share some of that content and say, let me chat you through how to start creating a CV, or let me chat you through where you would maybe start to look for any support with benefits and grants. So that bit is really, really exciting as we kind of move it forward. We will also be part of the champions for Get Online Week. So every year, the National Data Bank hosts a full week dedicated to helping people get online. It's from the 20th of October this year. So we'll have some social media content. We'll be hosting some events across some of our flagship branches across the UK. So inviting people in for, like a coffee chat situation and that nice open environment, and also some work on our social medias, because it's great that we're part of it, but we want as many businesses to be part of this as possible. So hopefully the Good Things Foundation will just keep growing from strength to strength. They've recently done some work with governments as well. So now it's kind of on the cards and on the table that, we need to get something done about those that are digitally excluded in the UK. So their work never stops, and we're just so happy to be a little part of that as such.
Yeah, I saw the government rolled out a new roadmap for digital exclusion in, I think it was February, which looks pretty comprehensive, actually. In terms of what could change that would make the biggest impact, if you could change one thing to help people with digital exclusion, to make digital inclusion better, what would you change?
If it was me that could change one thing, that's probably really different from the kind of government or societal change, etc. I think there needs to be definitely a more unified approach between like the banking industry and digital, and then like your kind of social sides. But for me, I would just get everybody talking about it.
Yeah.
Do you remember like maybe 10 years ago, and you were maybe out with your friends, the prospect of talking about money was a bit of a taboo subject, whereas I think that's a little bit like digital. We're all very presumptuous of what each other does, or presumptuous of what people know. So like I have a younger sister, and she does laugh at me because I'm not great on TikTok. It's just not on me at the moment. I'm just not at that stage. But everyone has different skills. So for me, it would be to remove that taboo of digital exclusion. So there's over 3 million people in the UK are excluded or impacted by an aspect of digital poverty. And on the back of that, there's probably so many more that lack skills or knowledge or like how to be safe online. And I do think there's an aspect of embarrassment sometimes with people that they maybe feel like, oh no, I don't know how to do that, but I don't want to ask the question. So for me, it would be to remove the taboo. I would want to get more people talking about it. And if that means that, in my local community, I'm out chatting about it, or I'm trying to encourage everybody within Virgin Money to just go out and talk about it in their communities and do that little thing, I think that the amount of passion that comes through that will help to remove that taboo. And, maybe there will be people that goes, I'd really love to learn a little bit more about how to stay safe online. Can you help me? And that answer would be yes. So I think removing the taboo side of it would be a great step in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, if you want to talk to as many people as possible, you can reach a lot of people by starting a TikTok,
My sister is desperate. Every family gathering and the phone comes out and she's like, let's do a TikTok. So I think I've done 2 TikToks.
Next year.
I'm not, yeah. You know what? That's going to be my skill set thing I'm going to change.
Everything is just changing so much, and you can see how people could get fatigued with the amount of new stuff that they have to learn, especially, I've been on holiday for 3 weeks from work, and in that time, how many AI models have rolled out that enable me to do things differently, better at work, but my ability to keep up is just getting less and less. So, for the average consumer for a consumer who's digitally excluded, that feeling must be a lot of pressure when you're then looking at, how do I get credit? How do I pay my bills? Things like that. Is there a way that businesses can do something in their digital experiences to make it better? Like, can they build their apps differently? Would you implore them to stop using particular processes in their apps and their websites?
So I suppose for me, and I could talk about this all day, it's about having that inclusive design. So the biggest issue would be if we start building, so like I would say I'm quite digitally savvy. So I would say that I do quite a lot of things online, but compared to perhaps yourself, I might not be in that same standard. So I think when it comes to digital aspects and the way that we treat and build digital platforms, we need to really think inclusively. So how can this support the majority of people? How does this support people even with like a lower confidence level to those that are really, really confident online? And that's going to be a real simple process. So I think always taking a step back and making sure that you're inclusively trying to design something and asking for feedback. If my boss listens to this, she'll be laughing because I'm all about, did we ask for feedback before we did that? Did we ask for feedback before we did that? If we get more voices around the table, you've got far more chance of making a platform product or journey that is going to support the actual user.
Yeah. And on a personal level for you, it must be, you said you had the best best job in the bank. It must be really rewarding to do all this. Is there anything you'd say to encourage people in other organizations to run similar programs?
Absolutely. So the first thing you need to do is go and live it. So we did a challenge last year and it was really difficult. So we went sim free. So we gave up, I think it was 24 hours we did, and we gave ourselves like 5 or 6 challenges to try and do without access to the internet. So it was like, find out, what time a cinema listing was on, or get a quote for car insurance. Have you ever tried to do that without the internet? Because that is really difficult. So
that does sound really difficult.
Understand how that person's going to feel, because whilst you're doing that as a challenge, that is everyday life for some people. For me to try and get car insurance, I think I had to then get on a train that cost me money to go to a city centre, because people don't sell car insurance. Like, I couldn't find it, etc. So live it first and understand the impacts, and then don't be afraid to challenge within your organisation. So we're very, very proud to work with Good Things Foundation. I'm very proud that I get to manage it. It's something very close to my heart, but we need to make sure that we don't stop talking about it and that we give options across the way. So we can't be at a stage that we are forcing someone, you must learn how to do this online, etc. There needs to be that channel of choice and making sure that it's bringing people on to support their lifestyle. So not everyone will need digital for a banking purpose. Perhaps live somewhere that has got a great variety of branches and everywhere takes cash and they never leave their town or whatever, but they might only be able to get X, Y, or Z on a digital platform. So for their purpose, they might need it for a different reason. We need to understand why they want to do it. So don't always presume that people want digital because they want to do their banking, or people want digital because they want Netflix or whatever it might be. There's always different reasons as to why everyone should be part of that kind of digital network moving forward.
It makes me wonder, has all of this changed how you as a company, or started to influence how you as a company interact with customers? I know you talked about how you'll start offering, access to the data bank and stuff via the phone, but in terms of how you communicate with customers, you talked about channel of choice there, in terms of letting them choose the channel that you communicate with them on. Is that something that's affected that?
So I think what's really, really good is that our team, where I sit within it, we've always been quite strong in making sure that we are inclusive for everyone in society. So making sure that we've got that channel of choice, whether it be online or on apps or whatever it might be. So I don't think it's changed the way that we've worked. What I do think it's done is it showed us that, see, all the little conversations that previously we would never have given much focus or time to. So going right back to those conversations, I know that if someone came into a branch before we worked with Good Things Foundation, they would have helped them with whatever they needed to get on their app or order their prescription, whatever it might be. Our people would always have done that. But what we have done is we've now started to really, really think about, well, what does the future look like? How do we evolve with digital? And how do we, a bit like you said, how do we keep up? I'm glad you're not questioning me on AI today, because that's definitely on my skill build. That's got to be up there with everything else on it. But we've started to look at how fast technology's evolved and how fast digital's evolved. 20 years ago when I joined banking, digital was there, but it wasn't a focus. It wasn't something that dominated, what you did in that daily task. So even if I look at, my career, how much digital's changed is massive. But it's only going to get faster because we're really good at it now. We've got all these other ways of doing it. So I suppose it's just more that we have a bigger focus on how we interact with our customers and what that impact really is. So a lot of credit to our great people who are having amazing conversations with people day in, day out.
Yeah, keeping up is I think the biggest challenge. It's the same with, kids and smartphones and all the other issues that we have around technology. It goes faster than we can build guardrails and guidelines and regulation and all of that stuff. So it is about where do we focus, and for organizations, how can we best support our customers now?
Yeah.
I should ask where we can find you online, but I think people can probably mostly find Virgin Money and know who you are already, but not if they're digitally excluded. Where can we find Virgin Money and where can we find you online and offline?
So Virgin Money is in 91 branches across the United Kingdom. And again, you can, as you say, it's mostly from a kind of digital side as well, out with those areas. We are very, very present on social media as well, but we're also in a number of banking hubs. So if you do live in an area that is serviced by some of the banking hubs in the UK, we're in a number of those as well. And our people are out in the local communities. So we are part of a number of food banks and supporting those kind of areas as well. We are on the Good Things Foundation website. So if you are part of an organisation and you're looking for your local data bank, there is an interactive map. So you'll be able to see where that channel of choice and that focus is. It might not be Virgin Money. There might be somewhere else in your local town or village that can offer you some help and support, but we are on there. And a lot of our stuff, if it's for other businesses, we would encourage you on our LinkedIn to support from there, particularly before Get Online Week at the end of this year.
And I should definitely change what I say at the end of this podcast, not to where can we find you online, but where can we find out more about you or something. I'll think about how I cater to all in that. Amazing work you guys are doing. So interesting to hear about it. Thank you so much for joining me today, Vicky, Stephen.
Thank you.